Hello, this is Gray Hughes of Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube. Please hit that like button, share, and subscribe. It really just hit that like button for me. I would really appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Today's video is going to be regarding some key questions that have been answered in the Idaho 4 murder case. And the first one we're going to go over is, how would someone leave so little forensic evidence at a crime scene? We see a lot of the Kohbergers talk about this, but in reality, even if you don't think Kohberger was the killer, whoever was the killer didn't leave much forensic evidence at the crime scene. In fact, in this case, the only evidence that they could find forensically was the DNA on the knife sheath. But if you were going to sit back and think, what person out there would have the ability to not leave, or at least the understanding to not leave forensic evidence behind, you might think it's somebody like a doctoral student in criminology. So Bryan Kohberger, he went to DeSales University, and he was taught by Michelle Bolger. And here's a picture of Michelle Bolger right here. Now, she was, or is, a associate professor in criminology, research methods, statistics, and data analysis. She referred to Bryan Kohberger as a brilliant student. Was one of my best students ever. She does admit, though, that she never saw him in person. She couldn't tell you how tall he was or how much he weighed, but her only interaction was via email and Zoom. So on Zoom, she must have seen him, but just couldn't tell how tall he was or how big he was, etc. Another one of his teachers there was Catherine Ramsland. Now, she is a professor of forensic psychology and criminal justice at DeSales University. That's the university that Bryan Kohberger went to for his master's degree program. She is an expert on the serial killer Dennis Rader. Kohberger was one of her students, and then while Kohberger was a graduate student at DeSales University, he wrote a paper titled Crime Scene Scenario Final. And in this paper, he discussed a wide range of elements regarding how to manage a crime scene. Of particular interest is his knowledge on how to not leave any forensic evidence behind as a crime scene tech, which would also transfer to a criminal. He says keeping people out of the scene minimizes evidence contamination, and this is based on the theory of transfer that states that we bring something with us to the crime scene and take something away, thus skewing the crime scene from the original state by contamination. He also said to wear gloves to protect the scene from contamination. And he says this will enable me to avoid leaving my latent fingerprints, which, that's interesting. That means, obviously he's aware to wear gloves. And also to wear protective clothing, boot covers, eyewear, fiber-free overalls, he said, face masks, hair nets, gowns, and anything that will prevent me from contaminating the scene with things I bring in with me. That's what he said. He was referring to himself. So he knows what to wear to a crime scene to avoid leaving any of his own forensic information at the crime scene. So isn't he the perfect person to do exactly what people keep claiming? Oh my God, how did he not leave anything at the crime scene? Well, whoever it was didn't leave anything. And Bryan Kohberger is particularly suited for doing just that, not leaving any evidence at the crime scene. All right, another question is, how does the CAS data, this is the FBI cell phone data information, correspond with surveillance footage? And that's something that is going to be a very crucial and essential part of this trial, is showing that when the white Elantra is seen, does it also correspond with the CAS data, or where the cell phone is located? And that's kind of what they did when the vehicle made it down to Clarkston, Washington, and Lewiston and Clarkston down there, where the vehicle is pinging the vehicle is spotted, and then Bryan Kohberger himself gets out of the vehicle. So that's exactly what they're looking for. Now, he doesn't get out of his vehicle when he's driving around, but prior to the homicides, but the CAS data is very significant. So take a look at this right here. Anytime we have the light blue, that's CAS data, and the red is where the white Elantra or suspect vehicle 1 is spotted. So look at right here at 2:44, Coberger is driving his Elantra and he's near Nevada Street at Northeast Stadium Way. All right, and that's right here. This is Nevada Street, and this is Northeast Stadium Way right here. You can see Northeast Stadium Way, and this is Nevada Street. So this is where it was spotted at 2:44. And then at 2:47, CAS cell data shows Kohberger's phone in Southeast Pullman. That's at 2:47. So when it pinged off of a tower down there, let's take a look. This area at Northeast Stadium Way is Southeast Pullman, Washington. Now, consider that we're talking about very, early in the morning. We're talking 2:47 a.m. So the fact that there would be another white Elantra sedan-looking vehicle exactly when Kohberger's phone was supposed to be in that area, it's within 3 minutes. This is very damning information, that it shows that the vehicle is in Southeast Pullman, Washington, and a white sedan matching the suspect vehicle 1 is also spotted in Southeast Pullman, Washington, near Northeast Stadium Way and Nevada Street. Then we move down to here. At 2:53, Kohberger's white Elantra is seen on camera again at Nevada and Stadium Way. And then look at this. The CAS data, Kohberger's phone turns off, and that's also in that same general area because that's exactly where it was just prior to that. And that's where in the hearings is where the defense team says that it's in Southeast Pullman, Washington. So if you look at that, that means the CAS data and the cell phone are in the same location. And if we look right here, it says that the vehicle was spotted on Nevada Street and Northeast Stadium Way, and then it says at approximately 2:53 a.m., a white sedan, which is consistent with the description of the white Elantra, known as suspect vehicle 1, was observed traveling southeast on Nevada Street in Pullman, Washington, towards SR 270. Now, when you take a look at the map here, I don't know if this is Northeast Washington Street right here. This is Nevada Street right here, this little area right here. So if it's heading southeast, that makes sense, south, and it's a little east. It's heading that direction. Now, I think what the vehicle did was it drove like this, down and around, and then came out on the highway right here. So I think it made its way on Southeast Forest Way all the way down to East Main Street, which is actually Highway 270, which takes you all the way into Moscow, Idaho. And I think it's very possible that the vehicle, when it was seen traveling there at 2:53, and then it turned off at 2:54, that's when the vehicle's already traveling, and maybe down in this area at 2:54, and then it makes its way to Floyd's Cannabis Shop at 3:02. Now, he just would have had to drive quicker through this neighborhood here than the local speed limit, which most people don't do. If it says 15 miles an hour, you're going 25. That's just the way it is, all right? So I think it's very possible he went like that. That's just a theory that I have because it said he's going southeast and is heading towards SR 270, which is right there. And also, if you look down here at around 525 and 526, look at right here. It says the vehicle spotted merging to Bishop from Johnson Avenue. And then the CAS data shows the vehicle is back near Pullman. And then right here at 5:30, the CAS data is moving consistent with heading home. And there it is on Stadium Way and Wilson Road. That's getting up higher north into Pullman, Washington, headed towards his house. And then look at 9 in the morning when he drove back out to the crime scene. Look at this. His phone is in Moscow, Idaho at 9:12. The CAS data shows the phone utilized the same resources as 1122 King Road. And then a minute after that, the vehicle is driving near the A&W. So, if you look at the map here, the vehicle was driving right here at basically 9:13, and at 9:12, his phone was utilizing the same cell tower that the house at 1122 King Road would be using. So that's very interesting. So what's interesting about this is when the CAS data shows Kohberger's phone is on, they seem to be able to get other shots of the vehicle on surveillance cameras to corroborate that the white suspect vehicle 1 is the same vehicle as Kohberger's, because his phone is in the same area at that time. And then down here, this is when the vehicle is in Clarkston, Washington. See right here at 12:46, an individual matching the description of Kohberger appears to be denied entry into Costco and leaves out the back entries, I think is what it says. But then right here it said, CAS shows Kohberger phone utilizes the same resources as Kate's Cup of Joe a minute later than that. And that's very close to there. If we go down to Clarkston, way down here, here is the Costco, and Kate's Cup of Joe is right here. So a minute after he drove out of here, he comes up here and he goes to Kate's Cup of Joe. And this piece of information here is interesting. At 5:32 and 5:36, his phone appears to turn on for 4 minutes near Johnson, Washington. This is PM. And then at 8:30, it's back near the residence, but there's only on for 4 minutes, and then I think it's off again for almost 3 hours, and then it turns back on. So that part's interesting. But anytime you can match up the cell tower data with surveillance footage, it's a big deal. And they did it multiple times here. Kohberger turned his phone off to avoid doing that while he was committing the homicides. And another thing to keep in mind, in the documents, it states that the Kohberger's phone 23 times was using the same cell tower as the 1122 King Road address. Also, on the Dateline episode, it mentioned that the vehicle was within 100 yards of the 1122 King Road residence 23 times leading up to the homicides. Now, could that be when Kohberger drove out there and scouted the area out, learned how to drive the area, made it sort of second nature for him? I know that when I went out here and developed this route right here a long time ago, I think it was back in September, and then in July of 2023 I went out there, and the first time I would go out there I couldn't figure out like where to turn, so I had to stop and pull over, and then eventually after about an hour or so I could easily make it my way around multiple times. So you definitely had to be out there and practice. Now the thing that really in the complex, I call this area inside of here the complex, I think that Kohberger had to have been there multiple times to at some point discover that you can drive back here and around behind 500 Queen Road. So the first times he came in, he probably drove like this, turned over here, and then eventually he got curious, went back here and was like, oh, look at that. Ooh, it goes back here, and then realized you could go the other direction and come in here. That way it looks like you're going back there in case there's a camera on the side of the building here or something, and it doesn't show you just turning going up here. So maybe he was using that just to try to throw some things off. Unfortunately for him, he probably didn't realize that the 1330 Linda Lane camera was back there and absolutely nails him. This camera right here, 1330 Linda Lane, filming back the Elantra driving around in circles, is a huge piece of evidence in the case. And the next segment here is What did Dylan Mortonson witness that is strong circumstantial evidence? Well, she witnessed a figure that is at least 5'10" or taller, which that's exactly what Bryan Kohberger is. It's a male, not very muscular, but athletically built. That's Bryan Kohberger. And then it says with bushy eyebrows. Now, bushy eyebrows is something that the defense team doesn't want to be allowed to put in there. They keep using little things like, oh, she drew eyebrows on her walls, etc. Maybe that's what she was seeing. But if you notice, they've had Bryan Kohberger use tweezers on his eyebrows because they don't look anything like what they used to look like. For example, here's a picture of Kohberger right there. This is just after the homicides. After he went back in the morning at 9 in the morning, he came back, and then at 10:30 he took this picture saying, hey, good job, whatever the hell he's doing with his thumb up right there. You got that. Then on the driver's license, look at that. Those are what you would call bushy eyebrows. And then there's another picture of him. Look at this one. Does his eyebrows look like that at all anymore? Hell no. He's absolutely trimmed them down, made them look totally different, because he knows that that was something that Dylan Mortonson saw that points right to him. Dylan Mortonson also describes a balaclava-like face mask in the text messages. And she literally tells Bethany Funk this. And look, here are the text messages. So the defense team has tried to claim that the investigators fed her the information about a balaclava and she just repeated it. But that's not true. If you look right here at 4:23:42, Dylan Mortonson to Bethany Funk, no, it's like a ski mask almost. And then, Bethany Funk's like, STFU, actually, and then just 10 seconds after Dylan's first text, she sends another one saying, Dylan Mortonson to Bethany Funk, like he had something over his forehead and a little around his mouth. So that's exactly what a balaclava looks like. So his forehead, a little around the mouth, and basically all you can see are kind of like the top of the nose and the eyes coming through. Dylan Mortonson actually drew a picture of it. So she definitely mentioned the balaclava that night. We're talking, she mentioned it 2 minutes after Coberger drives away in the white Elantra at a high rate of speed. Now, I know this frustrates people that I keep saying Coberger driving away at a high rate of speed. That's because I am 100% convinced that Bryan Kohberger is the killer in this case. Now, you don't have to believe that, but I have the right to have that opinion, and that's the opinion of law enforcement. They've arrested the right guy. It's my right to be able to say that. Okay, now, yes, there's going to be a trial, and all the evidence will have to be produced, but I can guarantee you that the evidence out there is going to be absolutely overwhelming against Bryan Kohberger. And if you notice, the Probergers out there have never give us anything that is really exculpatory whatsoever. They'd like to maybe include somebody else. Oh, there's blood spatter over there they didn't test. There's blood on this glove they didn't test. Blah, 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 blah. All right? What they fail to discuss is the fact that there's DNA on the knife sheath. Now, something also interesting, the fact that Dylan Mortonson mentions a balaclava, it turns out that Bryan Kohberger purchased a balaclava on January 10th, 2022 from a Dick's Sporting Goods. Man, Coberger is unlucky. All right, now here's another question. What significance does the Ridge Road camera have? Now, if you guys remember, the Ridge Road camera, we have to go all the way back up to Moscow, Idaho. The Ridge Road camera is right here. There's a camera likely on this side and then on that side of the building. It says one of the surveillance videos relied upon by law enforcement was from a camera located at 1125 Ridge Road. Video footage captured at 4:01 a.m. from this camera provided a clear view of the white sedan. And it's actually 40143. So you notice how they always, 401, I mean, I would say closer to 402, but it's 40143 when the vehicle is heading southbound right there. Footage from that camera provides a clear picture of the white Elantra. So after law enforcement viewed the white Elantra on this clear footage, they determined that it shared similar class characteristics to a 2014 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. This camera also shows that the white Elantra was missing its front license plate. So here we go. This is the clarity of it. This is not night vision. Notice the red tail light. So this is a white vehicle. It's a white Elantra. The fin looks elongated because of the slow shutter speed. This right here is where the license plate is supposed to be, and it is not there. So also law enforcement, based on timing and vehicle characteristics, believe this is the same white sedan that makes 3 initial passes and then a 4th pass of the 1122 King Road residence. The vehicle stops and parks at approximately 4:08 a.m. near the residence and then drives away at a high rate of speed at 4:20 and 47 seconds. The homicides took place within that approximate 13-minute window. The killer left behind an object associated with the homicides. Turns out that that was a KBAR knife sheath USMC Eagle Globe. And here is a 3D model that I purchased. It's the sheath of a 3D KBAR knife sheath that I purchased, so you can actually see it. That's what it looks like. USMC KBAR knife. The knife goes inside of that, and this is what the sheath looks like. If I render it out, you can see a little bit clearer. There you go. USMC, there's the Eagle Globe, and KBAR, K-A-B-A-R. Now we know that the homicides took place during that window, and we know that Xana Kernodle is still awake and alive using TikTok around 4:12. And then the vehicle speeds away at a high rate of speed, and then we see the text messages between Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortonson, and they were not able to get a hold of any of the other victims inside the house. So the homicides did take place between 4:08 and 4:20 and 47 seconds. If I was just going to use logic and common sense, I would say that Kohberger likely entered the house maybe around 4:10 and then exited the house at maybe 4:18, and that did blood spatter mitigation. The 4:18 time matches what time the dog was barking, etc. Did some blood spatter mitigation at his car, then drove away at a high rate of speed at 4:20 and 47 seconds after he made sure that he didn't transfer blood into his vehicle. All right, now what is the KBAR knife connection? All right, so now we know that there was a white Elantra missing its front license plate. We know that a KBAR knife sheath was left at the crime scene on actually one of the beds, and we'll hear that in a second. Investigators located a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Madison Mogen's right side when viewed from the door. So I think it's a little hard to decipher what they're actually saying, but I think the knife sheath was found on the right side of the bed, and I believe they're saying the right side of even Madison Mogen, but they're saying when viewed from the door. So what I would say is it would be on Madison Mogen's right side whether or not you viewed it from the door. So why are they saying when viewed from the door? So does that mean that she could be on her back and the knife is just on the right side of her given the perspective from the door, and therefore it's on the edge of the bed as well? All right, so let's take a look at where. So perhaps right here is where the knife was. Maybe she was on her back. We don't know. But from the door on her right side when viewed from the door. So it could either be that she's on her back or on her stomach, but I think the knife sheath, regardless, is over here on the right-hand side. And after they found the knife sheath, they processed it, and it was a KBAR USMC with the United States Marine Corps Eagle Globe and anchor insignia stamped on the outside of it. Ironically, Bryan Kohberger also purchased on Amazon that exact same KBAR Knife USMC and the United States Marine Corps Eagle Globe and anchor insignia model. He purchased the exact same make and model on Amazon. Now, what makes it even more significant is that when they were testing the knife sheath for DNA, they discovered a single source of DNA on the inside of the button snap. So if you're looking at this 3D model here, it would be like underneath this portion, that's the button snap right there. So underneath the button snap, so he snapped it shut but forgot to clean that one spot. Now when I say forgot to clean it, I think that he left the knife sheath there as a calling card. He thought he was so clever, he cleaned it so well, he just missed this tiny little spot. That's why they only could find the single source of DNA on the button snap. That's just a theory that I have. But the DNA testing on the knife sheath led to the discovery of a single source of DNA on the inside of the button snap. The DNA sequence was formatted for the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, and no match was indicated. Forensic genetic genealogy was then deployed by Othram Labs, and then the FBI. Othram was taking too long, so the FBI took over. The FBI developed a tip or lead in the case by identifying the DNA as belonging to Bryan Kohberger. Investigators then collected discarded trash from the suspect family home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. They also did all kinds of other investigation to see if Kohberger is a viable suspect. Investigators then collected discarded trash from the suspect's family home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Testing the trash led to identifying the statistical match of the father of the suspect. A warrant was then issued for the arrest of Bryan Kohberger. A search warrant for Kohberger's DNA was authorized, and a buccal swab of Kohberger's DNA was collected. When the sample DNA was compared to Bryan Kohberger's DNA, it was found to be a 5.37 octillion times more likely to be Bryan Kohberger's DNA than that of a random sample from another individual. Bryan Kohberger's DNA was a statistical match for the DNA found on the knife sheath that was found on the bed of Madison Mogen next to her right side. The KBAR knife that Bryan Kohberger purchased was purchased in late March of 2022, so the same year that the balaclava was purchased and the same year as the homicides. He purchased the balaclava and the KBAR knife and knife sheath. On November 15th, 2022, just 2 days after the homicides, Kohberger looked to purchase another KBAR knife on Amazon. On November 22nd, 2022, just 9 days after the homicide, the user of Kohberger's account on Amazon navigated to pages related to the deletion of account activity. He also looked to buy a utility sheath and a KBAR leather sheath, but did not purchase them. And then you ask yourself, what type of person actually goes out and tries to purchase a leather knife sheath or a KBAR knife sheath? You're looking for a sheath to buy. Well, that's somebody who's missing a sheath for a knife that they have. Very few people just go out and buy a knife sheath just for the hell of it and put it on a wall. I think Kohberger was looking to purchase another sheath. Now, was he purchasing one to commit another homicide so he could leave another knife sheath as a calling card? Because I think that's exactly what he was going to do. You know, the KBAR killer. You know, and then later on it'd be Kohberger the KBAR killer. He probably thought that had a nice ring to it in his own mind. But you see, what's interesting about all of this when you put it together is that there's a white Elantra driving around in the area in the right make, model, and year range, missing a front license plate. Kohberger drives a vehicle just like that. He turned his phone off during the critical hour that the homicides took place in. A white Elantra is seen spotted driving around the residence, and a positive identification of a white Elantra only 0.4 miles away from the residence on Ridge Road. And then the vehicle is spotted traveling around, doing 4 different loops around the property, and then it parks at 408 and then leaves at a high rate of speed at 420 in 47 seconds. How do we know that that's Bryan Kohbergers' white Elantra? Well, here's how. Inside the house, during the 13 minutes that that vehicle was parked outside, a knife sheath was left on Madison Mogen's bed that had Bryan Kohberger's DNA on it. Bryan Kohberger owns a white Elantra missing its front license plate. Therefore, the DNA on the knife sheath verifies to anybody that has a reasonable mind that the white Elantra driving around is Bryan Kohberger's, because there is DNA on a knife sheath left at the scene while that vehicle was parked outside. And Kohberger's phone was turned off, and Kohberger had been in the area 23 other times within 100 meters of the residence. I believe Bryan Kohberger is the killer, and I personally have no doubt. What about you? All right, everybody, leave a comment in the comments section. Let me know what you think. It took me a while to put all this together sort of in a cohesive fashion. If you could please leave a comment, hit that like button, share the video. I would really appreciate it. And thank you for watching. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video. And as I always say, until next time, be safe out there.